Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. It's Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and today I'm joined by Sarin Barsoumian. Thank you so much for spending it with us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for having me. Excited to finally get to connect with you.
Yeah, I know we've been saying this for a while, but happy to have you here today. And I always start the conversation with tell us all about you and why you do what you do.
Sure. So I am a financial advisor and I am a founder of an all-female team in wealth management. And obviously the structure of the team being all-female is very intentional. I want to give our clients, especially our female clients, a different experience than the one that I had exposure to early on in my career. And finance has been such a male-dominated industry. And so we're really passionate as a team about changing that narrative. And we really lead with financial planning versus investment management. And so I think that's one of the things that differentiates from what we do. Obviously, as an all-female team, we also lead with empathy. And it's really important for us to build strong personal relationships with our clients.
And I'm nodding profusely because yes, same, right? I think that's so important. Women do business, I think, differently than men do. Not right or wrong, just different. I feel like there's a different heart-centric nature when women come to the table with other women.
Yeah, and I know that's something that's our practices are very similar in terms of how they're structured. So we're very kumbaya in that sense.
I love it. I love it. And I feel like with the wealth transfer that is already happening, we're already seeing, women coming into more wealth than ever before. I feel like we are so needed, so needed.
Yeah.
So within the podcast, I know you've listened to a few here and there across the time frame. We talk through money memories. And for me, I brought this to the podcast and kind of created the podcast around this thought process of hearing clients talk through what a money memory was that they had as a younger child or as a teenager that helped mold their relationship as an adult to finance. And it's fascinating because it doesn't matter what walk of life you are, nationality, background. I think everyone truly has a money memory, whether it's serving them now or not, or they need to change the narrative. But there's something that's planted in a seed that I think people go back to when they have that moment thinking, why do I treat money the way that I do?
Yeah.
What's your money memory?
So I thought a lot about this one, and if it's okay with you, I want to skip ahead to a money memory from when I was more in my teens and early 20s. So my parents immigrated to this country in their 30s. So with no background in saving or investing, the country they came from just didn't have that sort of structure built into it. And I am the oldest of three. And so a lot of times I ended up kind of being the one who had to figure it all out. And oftentimes I was also the one helping my parents figure it all out. And so my mom background is in teaching, and then she ended up starting a family daycare in the home because for her, it allowed her to work, but also allowed her to be home when we got home from school. And as her business evolved, I ended up kind of being her go-to person and helping her set up her payroll. We set up her 401k, some of these basics in a small business. And I guess that's kind of really where it all started for me. I didn't realize it at the time. It was quite annoying to have to help her figure these things out. And she didn't have anyone else to lean on. But what it really showed me is how financial knowledge can empower someone. So that was probably a pivotal point kind of in my first exposures to the financial services world. And then there's another story also related to my mom that I like to share because I really feel like it helped set the trajectory of where I am now. But when I was in high school, all my friends were getting a job at the local grocery store. And of course, when you're in high school, you want to work with where your friends are working. And my mom was absolutely adamant about me not working there. And I was really annoyed, as you can imagine, a teenager. And so it turned out the reason why she was really adamant about me not working at this grocery store is when they first moved to America, she was pregnant with my brother and she couldn't get a job anywhere. And she ended up getting a job at a grocery store. And I didn't really understand it at the time because I just wanted to hang out with my friends, but she wanted better for me. And I was taking a class in accounts payable in high school. And she worked with my accounting teacher, and they actually helped me to get a job at an accounts payable firm at an engineering company.
Wow. As your
And
first
that
job.
as my first job. Yeah.
Wow.
And then after that, I worked as a bank teller in college to kind of have some fun money, if you will. So it's really quite interesting, like that the immigrant story piece of how I got to where I am. And so I'm really thankful for my mom, even though at that time I was not very happy with her, that she kind of guided me in a different direction because it really gave me a really solid foundation to come into the financial services industry.
That's super, super inspiring. Did you have any inkling when you were younger that this is kind of where you wanted to gravitate to? What was your moment where you were like, yes, this is what I'm doing?
Not at all. So when I worked in accounting or when I took those accounting classes, I really loved accounting. I loved the solving for a problem and I loved how, the credits and debits and everything kind of equaled out. I love that piece of it. What I didn't like about accounting was that it was really redundant. So every day of the week there was something and then it was on repeat. So it felt very like Groundhog Day to me. Um, and so when I graduated college, I actually thought I wanted to go either into HR or into event management because I also really liked kind of the logistics of planning events. And my dad had recently just read an article in a Consumer Reports magazine. I don't know. My dad like lives and dies by Consumer Reports. And it was one of those like top 10 careers for the next decade or something like that. And he said, you should be a financial advisor. And I thought financial advisor was going to be very similar to an accountant. I said, oh, that's boring, Dad. I don't want to do that. And so he's like, no, at least just look into it. And so what I did was I asked around anybody that had a financial advisor, and I just did a bunch of informational interviews. And in those interviews, I realized that actually this career is kind of a culmination of two of my favorite things, solving problems, the accounting piece, but also the relationship building. And even though the fundamentals of planning are the same, we have the opportunity to create personalized plans for each of our clients. And so that's kind of, I was like, okay, after those informational interviews, I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is a good fit for me.
That's awesome. No, and I feel like, again, from a peer perspective, looking into a peer perspective, just how you're getting out there and how you're sharing your story and your messaging in such a heart-centric manner, I can see how, you definitely attract fantastic clients.
It's really nice to be at a point where you can attract clients that are actually a good fit and you have a really good relationship with them.
Yeah, and it goes both ways, right? You want to be able to lift those clients and have that open line of communication on both sides. And that's, I think, where the magic really happens of being able to help people to the
Yeah.
level that you want to and having them be able to, really be a part of that too.
Yeah.
One thing that you said that I think is so important and empowering all in one is I feel like a lot of women out there who potentially are listening, like, don't really know what financial advisors do. Like, with my path, again, this was not in my realm to do this as a career path. I came into this after my grandpa passed, and we're trying to help my grandma make sense of investing from television. So, no clean, path for me to go in this way. And quite frankly, I didn't even know what I didn't know. But it's still a thing where I think people don't quite understand what we do and how we do it.
100%. And more often than not, it's not also not understanding is one thing, but also a lot of times in my first meeting with clients or people that want to interview us, I often hear, please don't judge. And that always breaks my heart when I hear that. And I think that's really another hurdle. It's outside of just not really knowing what it is that we do. I think people just think, oh, financial advisor, like it's just investment management. And that is true for some advisors. That is their focus. But for, financial planning led advisors like yourself or myself and our firms and our teams, that's not what we're leading with. And we really want to address all of their finances, including that emotional piece of them that's showing up, that's saying, please don't judge me.
That breaks my heart as well. Like I feel like even hearing you say that makes me emotional inside. And you see the commercials where, there's different groups saying, if you have $5 million, give us a call. If you have $1 million, give us a call, which is great. But then I think that leads to the feeling of not being worthy when people come to the table. And I feel like one thing I think that you do fantastic, and I think we do a good job on as well, is making people feel that everyone deserves a seat at the table. I feel like there's no silly questions, no matter where you're at in your financial journey. You absolutely deserve to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. What I always tell clients is, listen, I, I think about how I would feel if I was on the other side of the receiving end and someone said to me, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have $1 million, therefore I won't work with you. But you can, when you do, come back. Why would I ever come back and work with you? You just turned me away. You made me feel terrible about myself when I put myself in a vulnerable position to show up and ask for help. And so that's I always just kind of lead with, how would I want to be treated?
Mm-hmm.
It's just human decency, Obviously, we can't help everybody, but at the same time, I think in an industry that historically has not been inclusive to folks that don't have that assets under management threshold that's out there, I think teams like yours and mine are kind of disrupting the industry in that sense, and offering help for a segment of people that historically have not had access to that help or that advice. And that's going to be a game changer.
And what an honor. Like, what a huge honor to be able to help, right? Like, I don't take that lightly at all, whether you're coming to the table with $1 or $100 million. Like, it's a huge honor. You worked hard for that money, regardless. Like, what an honor it is to be able to help support you along your journey.
Absolutely.
So excited to talk about this next topic with you because we talked about it briefly before, but oh my gosh. So financial infidelities. And I feel like this is always a big, scary, hairy conversation for a lot of folks. And I love what we briefly touched on before this conversation. So please share the financial infidelity you were thinking about talking through, because I feel like it's one that we have not heard yet on this podcast.
Yeah. And, last week I was listening to some of your podcasts, just trying to prepare myself and what I wanted to share. And I thought that this is something unique that I could bring to the table that you might not have an opportunity to have a conversation with other podcast guests. But I really want to talk about something that I've witnessed in our industry that I think is a type of systematic financial infidelity. And what I'm specifically referring to is how advisors are recruited in and trained up in our industry. New advisors coming into this industry are very oftentimes underpaid and undertrained in the sense of how to build their business. And unfortunately, what that does is it creates a culture where you have to chase transactions to survive, right? Instead of focusing on building long-term relationships with your clients. And so for me, and I think for a lot of others, I think what's really missing is the guidance on how to run a sustainable client-centric business versus one that's built more on transactions. Because eventually you get to a point in your career where it's not just about getting clients, it's also about keeping them and servicing them. And so, how do you do that? And that work takes a lot of thought. And so that's something I wanted to kind of bring to the table and share with the people that listen to your podcast, because unfortunately, a lot of financial advisors have, when you say financial advisor, like people kind of grimace at you like, oh, and kind of roll your eyes. And that's never a good feeling. It's because people have had bad experiences, but it's because of how people are trained up in the industry.
Yeah. And I think That brings up a crazy story that I haven't shared that often, but
Mhm.
for me, I remember starting out in the industry 15 years ago, and I was getting my first paycheck, and I was like, okay, like I at that point had a mortgage. I was coming in, this was a second career coming in from television into this, and wanted to make a difference. And I knew I was taking a few steps back to be able to move forward in this industry to help others, right? To make an
Sure.
impact. So I thought. And the firm that I was at, the admin that was there took it upon herself to buy hundreds of dollars worth of stamps. So my first paycheck was 43 cents.
Wow.
So as painful as it is, and that's back in the day where like managed money wasn't really a thing unless you were super,
Yeah.
super high net worth. It was people going
Right.
into mutual funds or very transactional.
Yeah. Front enders.
Totally, totally,
Yeah.
which I feel like is very outdated.
Yeah.
From my opinion, I feel like there's
Yeah.
better ways to do things depending on that client situation or what that looks like personally. But yeah. And I remember just being like, how, thankfully, I had emergency money, but how am I going to pay my mortgage? And that's always a misnomer because I feel like people always think, oh, financial advisors, they're making a ton of money right out the gate. And that's not always the case. And it's not always the case, I feel
Rarely the
like,
case.
no. And you bring up a point ethically too. When you are with my team, everybody gets paid. Interns get paid, everybody gets paid. Like, I don't want it to be a feel like that where it's a shark tank where people have to go after each other to try to get business or be transactional because it should be client first and foremost in every situation, period. There's no other way.
Yeah.
But I feel like back then it was a whole different world, whole different world.
Yeah. And, I grew up in a model, like my first job out of college, I really felt like it was like, let's just bring in a bunch of college recruits and like throw them at the wall and see who sticks. And then if they leave, it's fine because we will keep those clients that they brought in and just reassign them to somebody else. Um, who wants to be part of that model? I certainly, don't. So I do think it is a systematic problem in the industry, and I think we need to normalize talking about it. And firms like you and I are treating our team members differently, but unfortunately, some of those bigger, wirehouses are still in that model where they just kind of bring in people and see who sticks.
Yeah, and you're right on the hey, bring in 300 people, right? Do
Yeah,
what you need to do, and then oh, you didn't make it. Well, this advisor will take over what you have. It's almost I hate to say it, like not excited to see you fail, but it's okay that you failed because we'll take on what you brought in. Thanks.
yeah. But I also think it goes back to just education for the consumer, and for them to understand you really get what you pay for, right? So there's advisors out there that do free financial planning. Why would you or I work for free? Why would you want to take advice from someone who doesn't value their time or their expertise and wants to give it away for free?
And are you going to value them because it's free? I feel like there needs to be an exchange. I mean, we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive, right?
Right.
By any means.
Yeah.
However, we bring a lot to the table, much like I'm sure you and your team do as well.
Yeah.
But when things are free, I feel like there's a different misnomer with people where they don't find value in it at that point either.
Yeah. I wouldn't give away my time for free. I value not just my time, but the time of my team. Right. And so I think that's another, misconception in the industry about like what should be charged, how much should be charged. And there's such a wide variety. There's people out there doing it for free. There's people out there that are charging 50,000 a year. And so I think it's hard for the consumer to understand what model works for them and where do they fit into that.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes into like what you said earlier, having people have the conversation with you. They're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them to make sure it's a fit for both parties involved, to make
Yeah.
sure that you can support each other as you move forward. And I think people doing their due diligence and really sitting down with someone and looking at it as a long-term relationship,
Yeah.
not transactional, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a relationship. I want to be there for your kids and your grandkids and through different life phases that you have along the way.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we're working with 4 generations of clients. Like, I geek out about that. That makes me really excited, you know? I wish my parents had that sort of help, and that I was setting up a Roth IRA and doing $100 a month like we're doing for some of our clients' kids right now, you know?
And that's hugely impactful, I think, starting somewhere, right? And for those kids, you're planting a seed so young,
Yeah.
whether that meaning, from the family that they learned it or they're learning it from you, like that is just amazing. I feel like that's the ripple that I feel like by making even a small impact, that ripples out generations and generations. And for you seeing 4 generations, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, of course. I'm
So
glad
as
to have this
we
conversation.
Oh my gosh, I think it's for me, this is well overdue. I was so excited to have you on the show. So as we begin to wrap the conversation, I always like to ask, what are tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money differently in your own household?
So in our household, I am a strong believer of invest first, right? And then enjoy the rest of it. And so for me, every single annually, my husband and I sit and we say, okay, what are our goals for next year? And how do we need to kind of change what we're investing, where we're investing, and how we're saving? And then we just kind of do a quarterly check-in, because during the course of the year, you could have windfalls, or you could have setbacks. And so we kind of evaluate that and just make sure that we're saving, or we're increasing the percentage that we're saving, at least annually, if not quarterly. And so that allows us to spend the rest of it freely, knowing that all of our goals are being taken care of and addressed. Like for me personally, I love to travel, and
Same.
we probably spend more on travel than the average household, but that's fine because I know that I'm doing everything else I need to hit our goals. And so that's an approach that I take personally, and that I've shared with some clients, and they've really gotten on board with too. But every client, every household is a little bit different. So really you have to focus on what's going to work for you and what you'll actually implement, right?
And I think it's being disciplined, right? At the end of the day, it's being disciplined. Are you doing what you need to do to make things happen? And the mere fact that you're communicating, there's
Yeah.
so many folks that don't take that time to communicate with their partner. I think that is just the most important thing too. If you have a partner in your household, to make sure that you're on the same page.
Yeah, and I think as our income has grown, we've started to look at our time, and again, kind of going back to your valuing our time a little bit. So we've started outsourcing tasks. Like, is this something I really want to do, or would I rather spend time with my children? Or is there a better use of my time if I outsource this? So simple things like getting the house clean or having landscapers. But another thing that I've personally added into my into kind of where we spend our money is I have a budget for wellness. So for
Ooh.
example, I get a monthly massage, a quarterly facial. We recently upgraded the gym that we're attending. And I don't think of these things as indulgences. I think of them as investments, because that allows me the ability to show up as my best self for me, for my family, for my clients, for my team. And so I think that's something to consider as well.
I love that so much. I feel like I'm a work in progress there, but I feel like that's definitely an area I could lean into more of
Yeah.
making sure that that time is dedicated for, really that self-care. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for making time to chat today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we had a chance to have this time.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully those of you watching and or listening will join us on the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.